Supreme Overseer Vaxter stood before the Grand Council's crystalline chamber, his iridescent scales reflecting the soft azure light as he presented the discovery that would forever change the Nexus Collective. The holographic display showed a spiral galaxy arm, zooming in on a seemingly unremarkable solar system with 9 planets. Esteemed council members, Vaxter began, his voice resonating with the formal tones of high Nexus speech. Our expansion fleet has encountered a developing civilization in Sector 7249. They call themselves humans, and their primary world is the 3rd planet from their star. The council members, each representing a different aspect of the collective's governance, watched with mild interest. They had overseen the absorption of dozens of species into their empire over the millennia. This would be no different. They have achieved rudimentary space travel, Vaxter continued, with settlements on their neighboring planet and several orbital habitats. Their technology level is approximately Class 3 on the Nexus scale. First speaker, Clara waved a dismissive tentacle. Another primitive species fumbling their way to the stars. Standard protocol should suffice. Send the integration fleet. But xenoanthropologist Dr. Mira Tell stepped forward, her crystalline exoskeleton chiming softly as she moved. Supreme Overseer, council members, I must advise caution. Our studies of human history reveal concerning patterns. The chamber filled with dismissive chitters, but Vaxter gestured for her to continue. Dr. Tell projected a new series of images, human battles throughout history, technological leaps, and adaptation rates that defied normal evolutionary curves. This species exhibits unprecedented adaptability, she explained. They've survived multiple near-extinction events, developed technologies in decades that should take centuries, and most worryingly, they show an almost instinctive ability to weaponize any technology they encounter. High Admiral Zextor laughed, the sound like grinding crystals. You suggest we should fear a species that still uses chemical propulsion. Their most advanced ships would be target practice for our lowest-class vessels. Dr. Tell's crystalline structure pulsed with frustrated colors. That's exactly my point. Admiral, look at this data. In 73% of their recorded conflicts, the technologically inferior force emerged victorious through unconventional tactics. They don't fight according to any predictable doctrine. But the council had already made their decision. First speaker Clara rose, her massive form towering over the others. We will proceed with standard integration protocols. Send them the usual ultimatum. Join the collective or face extinction. Deploy the 7th Fleet. Dr. Tell made one final attempt. At least let me send them a more diplomatic. Enough. Clara interrupted. They are primitives. Their response is irrelevant. The Nexus Collective has never failed to absorb a Class 3 civilization. As the council dispersed, Dr. Tell approached Vaxter privately. Supreme Overseer, please, let me show you something else. She displayed one final piece of data, an analysis of human entertainment media. They've been imagining and preparing for this exact scenario for over a century. Every possible way to defeat a technologically superior force. They've already thought it through, tested it in simulations, and taught it to their children through games and stories. Vaxter studied the data for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. Your concern is noted, Dr. Telephone, but the council has made its decision. Prepare the integration fleet. As she watched him leave, Dr. Tell's crystalline form dimmed with resignation. She began composing her report, starting with a simple heading. Probable strategic mistakes in first contact with human species. The 7th Fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, 500 ships strong, their crystalline hulls refracting starlight in dazzling patterns. High Admiral Zextor stood on his command deck, anticipating another routine integration. The humans' response to their ultimatum came swiftly, in all known languages of the collective. It was short. We decline your offer. Leave our space immediately. This is your only warning. The bridge crew burst into laughter. But Dr. Tell, who had insisted on accompanying the fleet, felt her crystalline structure resonate with dread. "Admiral," she said quietly, "notice how they said only warning. Not final warning. Only warning. They don't intend to give us another chance." "Deploy the fleet in standard formation," Zextor commanded, ignoring her completely. "Prepare to demonstrate our superior." The sensor officer's crystal structure suddenly flashed alarm patterns. "Admiral, multiple anomalies detected. The humans. They're moving their civilian ships out of the combat zone." Dr. Tell's resonance pitched higher. "They're clearing their kill box. Admiral, we need to." But it was already too late. The lesson about humanity's unconventional warfare was about to begin, and the Nexus Collective would learn it the hard way. The first sign that something was wrong came when the 7th Fleet's long-range sensors went dark. Not through any detectable attack or electromagnetic pulse, but rather through an overwhelming flood of conflicting data. Thousands of small objects, barely larger than satellites, had suddenly activated throughout the solar system, each broadcasting what appeared to be a perfect replica of a Nexus warship's signature. "Impossible," High Admiral Zextor muttered, his crystalline form clouding with confusion. "Their sensor technology shouldn't be capable of." "They didn't need advanced sensors," Dr. Tell interrupted, her voice tight with tension. "They've been studying our scout ships for decades, analyzing our emissions, our patterns, our frequencies. These are decoys, Admiral. Very simple ones, but perfectly tailored to confuse our specific systems." The sensor officer's crystals pulsed with increasing distress. "Sir, I can't distinguish the real human ships from the false signatures. There are thousands of them." Before Zextor could respond, new alerts blared across the command deck. Dozens of the Collective's forward ships suddenly reported critical system failures. Their crystalline hulls, designed to channel and amplify energy weapons, began to vibrate at increasingly dangerous frequencies. "They're using our own technology against us," Dr. Tell explained, her voice filled with a mixture of horror and admiration. "Those primitive radio waves they're broadcasting. They're perfectly tuned to the resonant frequency of our hull crystals." The affected ships began to shatter, their beautiful crystalline structures breaking apart from the inside out. It wasn't a particularly efficient method of destruction. Less than 8% of the fleet was vulnerable to this specific frequency, but it demonstrated something far more terrifying. Humans understood how to turn the Collective's technological advantages into weaknesses. "Battle formations," Zextor commanded, his voice sharp with rage. "Launch fighters and prepare main weapons arrays." But the humans weren't fighting according to any recognizable doctrine. Instead of meeting the Collective's fighters in combat, they launched what appeared to be clouds of metallic dust. The Nexus pilots, trained to engage in precise formation combat, found their ship's systems clogged and their crystal sensors blinded by millions of microscopic reflective particles. "Primitive chaff," one of the bridge officers sneered. "They're using 20th century countermeasures against a spacefaring civilization." "No," Dr. Tell corrected, her crystalline form pulsing with growing anxiety. "Look closer at the composition of those particles. They're not just reflective. They're adaptive. Some kind of rudimentary nanotech. And there." She trailed off as the particles began to gather around the fighter's hull crystals, forming intricate patterns that mimicked the ship's own crystalline structure. The effect was devastating. The fighter's energy weapons, designed to be amplified by their crystal hulls, were instead reflected back at themselves. On the main viewer, the space around Earth had become a chaos of false signatures, reflecting particles, and crystalline debris. Traditional Nexus combat doctrine, based on precise formations and overwhelming firepower, was worse than useless. It was as if the humans had designed their entire defense strategy around turning the Collective's strengths into vulnerabilities. "Admiral," the tactical officer called out, his crystal structure flickering with strain. "We're detecting numerous small objects approaching from multiple vectors. They appear to be mining drones." Dr. Tell's resonance pitched to an almost painful frequency. Those aren't mining drones. Look at their trajectory calculations. They're too precise, too coordinated. The mining drones proved her right moments later, revealing themselves to be guided weapons platforms. Each one carried what appeared to be a simple fusion bomb, primitive by collective standards, but devastating when detonated in precisely calculated positions relative to the Nexus ship's crystal lattice structure. "They trapped us in normal space," Dr. Tell observed. "Every piece of primitive technology they possess has been repurposed as a weapon. Every peaceful research platform transformed into a military asset. This isn't just adaptation, Admiral. This is their doctrine. Their entire civilization is built around the concept of turning any available tool into a weapon." As if to emphasize her point, the humans began their main attack, not with warships or energy weapons, but with swarms of modified construction robots, maintenance drones, and mining equipment. Each one had been stripped down and reprogrammed for a single purpose: exploiting the weaknesses in Nexus technology the humans had spent decades studying. "Send the signal," Zextor commanded, his voice heavy with unfamiliar emotion. "Full retreat, any way possible." As the remnants of the Seventh Fleet struggled to escape the killing field that Earth's orbit had become, they received a final transmission from the humans. It was audio only, broadcast on all frequencies. "We warned you. Remember that the next time you think about invading a primitive species." Dr. Tell, watching the disaster unfold, began composing the new report. Its title was simple: Human Combat Doctrine, the Weaponization of Everything. In the crystalline depths of the Nexus Collective's war chamber, first speaker Clara faced an unprecedented crisis. The holographic displays showed a spreading web of red indicators, Nexus outposts, and forward bases falling silent one by one. Not through overwhelming force or superior technology, but through what the humans called asymmetric warfare. "Show me the latest incident," Clara commanded, her crystalline form dulled with concern. The hologram shifted to show a Nexus forward base on a small moon in the Proxima Centauri system. The base had been state-of-the-art, protected by energy shields that could withstand capital ship bombardment. Yet it fell to what appeared to be a civilian mining vessel, its holds filled not with ore, but with billions of self-replicating machines no larger than dust particles. "The humans call them gray goo," Dr. Tell explained, her voice heavy with professional admiration. "A theoretical weapon they've apparently perfected. These nanomachines don't try to breach our shields. They simply filter through the natural molecular gaps in the energy barrier, then disassemble our technology at the atomic level." The recording showed the base literally dissolving, its advanced materials broken down and reconstructed into more nanomachines. The process took less than 6 hours. "Barbaric," Clara hissed. "They're not even trying to capture our technology." "They don't want our technology," Dr. Tell corrected. "They've analyzed our capabilities and decided it's more efficient to develop countermeasures than to attempt to duplicate our advances. Look at this." She brought up footage from another engagement: a squadron of Nexus warships executing a perfect pincer movement against what appeared to be a human supply convoy. But as the warships moved into position, the human ships suddenly accelerated to impossible speeds, their hulls glowing with contained nuclear fire. "Orion drives," Dr. Tell explained. "A propulsion system they theorized centuries ago, but never built. Until now. It literally rides the shockwave of nuclear explosions. Primitive, dangerous to the crew, and absolutely devastating in combat, because we never conceived anyone would be desperate or crazy enough to actually use it." The footage showed the human ships, powered by their nuclear pulse engines, executing maneuvers that should have torn them apart. They closed with the Nexus warships at speeds that made their relatively primitive weapons devastatingly effective. Rail guns, considered hopelessly outdated by collective standards, became hypervelocity weapons capable of punching through crystalline hulls before energy shields could react. "They're not fighting the war we expected," High Admiral Zextor admitted, his previous arrogance replaced by grim respect. Every time we adapt to one of their strategies, they switch to something completely different. Last week, they used weaponized wormholes to redirect our own fire back at us. Before that, they somehow turned our quantum communication network into a delivery system for computer viruses. Because they're not trying to win battles, Dr. Tell said. They're not even trying to defeat us technologically. They're waging a war of psychological attrition. Look at these after-action reports. Every engagement is designed not just to destroy our forces, but to demonstrate that our technological superiority means nothing. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Nexus Collective had built its entire civilization around the principle of technological advancement. Their hierarchy, their tactics, their very identity was based on the assumption that superior technology meant superior capability. New intelligence, an analyst announced, their crystals pulsing with urgency. We've intercepted communications suggesting the humans are preparing something called Project Babel. Dr. Tell's resonance shifted to a frequency indicating deep concern. Admiral, remember how they corrupted our quantum communication network? I don't think that was just a tactical strike. They were mapping it, learning how it works. And now, she brought up an analysis of recent human activities. They had been capturing small amounts of Nexus quantum communication crystals, studying them, and apparently finding ways to replicate their basic functions using their primitive technology. They're not trying to duplicate our technology exactly, she explained. They're building crude but effective analogs, specifically designed to disrupt our systems. If they succeed, our entire command and control structure could be compromised. Zextor finished, his crystalline form clouding with worry. A new alert drew their attention back to the tactical display. Another Nexus battle group had encountered human forces, but something was different this time. The humans weren't using their usual hit-and-run tactics. Instead, they seemed to be deliberately drawing the Nexus ships into an elaborate trap. Full retreat, Zextor ordered immediately, but it was too late. The human ships suddenly split apart, revealing themselves to be modular units rather than traditional vessels. They'd recombined into different configurations, displaying a level of tactical flexibility that the rigid Nexus ship designs couldn't match. As the battle group was systematically dismantled by the transforming human ships, Dr. Tell began composing what she suspected would be one of her final reports to the Council. Its title reflected the growing understanding among the Collective's leadership: the human advantage, innovation without limits. The emergency session of the Nexus High Command wasn't going well. Supreme Overseer Vax Tur watched as his most experienced military leaders argued over tactical displays and battle reports, their crystalline forms flickering with discordant patterns of stress and fear. Fear, an emotion that hadn't been seen in the Collective's leadership for millennia. Another battle group lost. High Admiral Zextor reported, his voice modulated to maintain calm despite his obvious distress. But this time it was different. The humans didn't destroy them. The tactical display showed the aftermath of the engagement. The Nexus ships were intact but dormant, their crews evacuated into space where human vessels had rescued them. Each ship's crystal hull had been carefully marked with the same message, written in the Collective's own language. We could have killed you. Remember that. They're not just defeating us, Dr. Tell observed, her scientific detachment slipping. They're systematically dismantling our entire military doctrine. Look at the psychological impact reports. The data was devastating. Nexus crew members, trained from creation to believe in their technological and tactical superiority, were experiencing unprecedented rates of combat stress. The humans' refusal to follow conventional warfare logic had shattered the Collective's carefully constructed military hierarchy. The latest human transmission, a communications officer announced, their crystals pulsing with uncertainty. It's being broadcast directly into our quantum network. Somehow they've completely mapped our secure channels. The message was simple: footage from human historical archives, showing countless examples of technologically superior forces being defeated by innovative tactics and unconventional warfare. Each clip was annotated with careful analysis, demonstrating how these same principles were being applied in space. They're teaching us, Dr. Tell realized. Every engagement, every tactic, every message, it's all part of a lesson. They're showing us why we're losing. A new alert drew their attention. The humans had launched another offensive, but this one targeted not the collective's military assets, but their understanding of warfare itself. Human ships appeared simultaneously at multiple Nexus outposts, using captured quantum communication technology to broadcast directly to the defenders. The messages were carefully crafted, speaking to the individual fears and doubts of each crystalline crew member. They highlighted the fundamental flaws in Nexus military thinking, the over-reliance on technology, the rigid adherence to doctrine, the inability to adapt to unexpected situations. Psychological warfare, Zextor muttered. But not like anything in our tactical databases. They're not trying to demoralize our forces. They're trying to make them think. The evidence was in the after-action reports. Nexus crews were beginning to question orders, to doubt the effectiveness of their traditional formations and tactics. Some had even begun attempting to improvise during combat, something unprecedented in collective military history. Look at this. Dr. Tell highlighted a particular engagement. A Nexus destroyer captain, faced with a human ambush, had abandoned standard doctrine and attempted to employ human-style adaptive tactics. They had survived the encounter, but the implications were profound. We're losing more than ships and territory, Vaxtur realized. We're losing our identity as a military force. The humans' next move proved his point. They began broadcasting tactical data from their own military training programs, showing how they prepared for combat against superior forces. The messages were clear. This is how we think. This is how we fight. This is why we win. They've turned their greatest weakness into their greatest strength, Dr. Tell explained. Their technological inferiority forced them to develop warfare doctrine that doesn't rely on technological superiority. They don't just adapt to circumstances. Adaptation is their strategy. The final blow to Nexus military psychology came in the form of a simple demonstration. A single human ship, unarmed and unshielded, approached a Nexus battle group. Before the collective's forces could react, the ship transmitted detailed tactical analyses of each Nexus vessel, pointing out every vulnerability, every potential weakness, every flaw in their formation. Then, just as calmly, it departed, leaving the Nexus commanders to realize a terrifying truth. The humans could have destroyed them at any time. They had chosen not to, and that choice was more devastating to Nexus morale than any weapon could have been. We need to sue for peace, Vaxtur finally announced, his crystalline form dimmed with acceptance. Not because we cannot continue fighting, but because every day this war continues, we lose more than ships and territory. We're losing our understanding of what warfare should be. As if in response to his realization, a new human transmission reached them. It contained only a quote from an ancient human military treatise. Supreme excellence consists of breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. Dr. Tell began her final report to the Council, titled simply, The Ultimate Weapon, Adaptability. The peace conference took place on neutral ground, a space station constructed specifically for the occasion, combining both human and Nexus technology in a way that would have seemed impossible months earlier. First speaker Clara led the collective's delegation, their crystalline forms subdued and thoughtful. Across the table sat Admiral Sarah Chen, Earth Defense Force, her calm demeanor masking the steel that had helped humanity survive. Before we begin formal negotiations, Clara said, her voice resonating through the chamber, there is something we must understand. You knew from the start you could defeat us, didn't you? Admiral Chen smiled slightly. No, we knew we could adapt faster than you could. There's a difference. Dr. Tell, now serving as chief sinoanthropologist and cultural advisor, watched the exchange with fascination. The humans hadn't just won a war. They'd fundamentally changed how the Nexus Collective viewed the universe. Your technology, Clara continued, it wasn't primitive at all. Was it? You deliberately maintained the appearance of technological backwardness while developing countermeasures to our systems. Not exactly, Chen replied. Our technology is less advanced than yours in many ways. But we learned long ago that technological superiority doesn't guarantee victory. Every piece of technology we developed was designed with one primary goal: adaptability. The Admiral brought up a holographic display, showing the evolution of human warfare throughout the conflict. What the collective had seen as desperate improvisation was revealed to be part of a carefully crafted strategy. We didn't build weapons to match yours, Chen explained. We built systems that could be rapidly modified to exploit whatever weaknesses we discovered. Our ships weren't inferior. They were modular, designed to be reconfigured mid-battle. Our primitive computer systems weren't simple. They were robust, resistant to quantum interference, and infinitely hackable. Dr. Tell's crystals pulsed with sudden understanding. That's why you broadcast your tactics, your strategies, even your military history. You weren't just fighting us. You were teaching us. We recognized ourselves in you. Chen nodded. A species so convinced of its superiority that it had forgotten how to grow, how to adapt. We've made that mistake ourselves, many times throughout our history. The difference is, we learned from it. The human delegation presented their terms. They were surprisingly moderate. No demands for territory, technology, or reparations. Instead, they proposed something unprecedented: a cultural exchange program. We want to learn from you, Chen said, and we think you need to learn from us. Not our technology or our tactics, but our perspective, our history, our mistakes. Clara's crystalline form shifted through patterns of confusion, understanding, and finally, acceptance. You could have destroyed us. Why didn't you? Because destruction isn't evolution, Chen replied. We fought this war not to defeat you, but to make you understand something we learned through millennia of conflict. True strength lies not in superiority, but in adaptability. The peace treaty that emerged from those talks would reshape both civilizations. The Nexus Collective began incorporating human military doctrine into their training, learning to value innovation alongside technological advancement. Humans gained access to Nexus technology, but maintained their focus on adaptability and unconventional thinking. Years later, Dr. Tell stood before a mixed class of human and Nexus military students, teaching the lessons of what had become known as the Evolution War. The lecture hall combined crystalline architecture with human ergonomic design, a physical representation of how both species had grown. The greatest weapon humanity brought to this conflict, she explained, wasn't their technology, their tactics, or even their adaptability. It was their understanding that victory doesn't always mean destroying your enemy. Sometimes, victory means teaching them how to change. She displayed the final transmission humanity had sent during the war, now carved into the walls of every Nexus military academy. The species that survives is not the strongest or the most intelligent. It is the one most adaptable to change. In Earth's military archives, a new document took its place alongside humanity's greatest military treatises. Its title was simple: The Nexus Protocol. How teaching an enemy to evolve can be the greatest victory. Humanity had won more than a war. They had proven that true advancement comes not from achieving superiority, but from maintaining the ability to adapt, to learn, and most importantly, to teach others to do the same. As human and Nexus ships began joint patrols of their now shared space, they carried with them a new understanding. In the vast darkness between the stars, the ability to change was the only constant worth maintaining.